Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it.
And jumping right in. Who buys them?
Who buys them? And so that's going to be like, that is in and of itself to set some context for everybody. I'm not just like pulling this one out of the old beanie here. Last night it was tweeted out, and this is actually coming off of some stuff that's been going on behind the scenes for a couple weeks, that it was rumored that Sony would be purchasing Square-Enix. We've seen a closer relationship with them since for the last couple years, and that just keeps getting closer and closer. Now, I read the rumors about Sony buying Square-Enix as just rumors in the regards. I don't really look much like it's at that point. It's nothing for us to bring that information to you because it really is just kind of for fun for thought. And then last night, Bloomberg Japan reporting that Square-Enix has multiple interested buyers, which in and of itself doesn't mean anything. And then Square-Enix actually then clarifying today that no, they're not looking to sell the company. And that's the context. And so I really want to get y'all's opinion. I'm going to start with Magic Man. Who should buy Square-Enix? Should they sell? And yes,
nobody.
No, why? Nobody. Okay.
Okay. First off, and I tweeted this yesterday when I saw the news, just because somebody is interested in buying something does not mean said item is actually for sale. That's a different discussion. And Square acknowledged today, or at least publicly said, right? Privately, we don't know, but publicly said, we're not for sale. Nobody's made an offer. We're not looking for offers. I might want to buy Chris's car, and I might be interested in buying Chris's car, but if you ain't interested in selling it, then the story ends right there. So we also have to separate, I think, is it Square-Enix as an entire entity, or is it Square-Enix as in the gaming department or the manga department, or, pick off pieces. So assuming that interested buyers would be interested in the entire company, I don't think there's any way anybody but Sony would get it. And I think a lot of that actually has to do with Japanese culture. I don't think you're going to see like a Bethesda sale to Microsoft in this case. I'm sure Microsoft would be interested, but if you're talking lock, stock, and barrel, I think Sony is the only one that really has the income to do it, the cash to do it, and the Japanese culture clout to be able to do it. That said, I don't think anybody should. I don't want these titles exclusive, first off. I don't want them exclusive to Sony. Yes, in my mind, and you said this at the beginning of the show, Brian, or in pre-show, that there is a very mental thing with me and Final Fantasy being associated with Sony since Final Fantasy VII, pretty much. Prior to that, they were associated in my mind with Nintendo. So there is a part of me that goes, oh, wow, if they went back to Nintendo, then maybe they could do this and this and this. Oh, shit, I don't want these things being exclusive to the Nintendo Switch. No, I don't want that. Same type of thing with Microsoft, same type of thing with Sony. I just don't want them being exclusive. And I think it starts putting... Honestly, I'm not... Separate topic. I'm not exactly sure what Sony's doing in some certain avenues right now and some of the mentality behind some more recent decisions. I don't necessarily trust... Yeah, true. I don't necessarily trust their judgment on some of these things. So I don't think anybody should buy them. The big players are the ones that you would think of: Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft. Everybody else would have a hard time financially doing it. And I think it was only like 5 years or so ago. Didn't Sony divest a bunch of stock in Square-Enix? I know they needed cash and capital at the time. So maybe they've purchased a little bit of it back, but they're not even a primary holder anymore. So I'm going to go with nobody should buy them. But if you make me pick one, I feel safest in Sony's hands, but not all that safe.
Chris?
I think that Sony is a little out of touch with where we're headed as far as exclusives, and
That's
with the idea that I want a $600 hard-to-find purchase to make my previous purchase invalid. I want my friends that can't find a PS5 to be locked away from me. We are past those days. We are getting closer to PC Master Race in console. We are saying, hey, this is a PC that hooks up to your TV, is powered by controller, and is an invitation to all. Xbox is there. Nintendo has always been priced to be there. Sony needs to get on that train. I think exclusives within first parties make sense because that's a chance to build in-house tools to show things off. We did it with Wii Sports better than any other in-house exclusive ever will, but Xbox was founded on the tenets of things like Halo. Whether you're a shooter fan or not, it is a founding member of the Xbox community. And I think there's a place for that. But third-party exclusives, it's a need for cash. Today on stream, we were talking about Blizzard and the relationship with Activision. It's a need for cash. And so unless Square Enix needs the money, I don't know why they would sell. Assuming they're going to sell, and assuming we're going to see the world catch on fire for what feels like a needless reason outside of a few shareholders coming out ahead, because of Sony's desire to push exclusivity and because Game Pass is now saying Game Pass will bring things to any platform that has Game Pass on it, just wanting to watch the world burn, the pessimist in me goes, I hope Microsoft outbids them. And I hope it's such a big number they have to take it. And then we get more exclusives within, like, just say, and then Game Pass can come to PlayStation. Like the pessimist part of me wants to just hand the underdog the big club.
Oh, it's so weird to think of Microsoft as the underdog in this case, because I don't think Microsoft has ever been.
They're big.
Well, I know they did horrible last generation, and in context, like they sold money and they made money comparatively. Right. So, but it's funny because the whole thing has always been, when is Microsoft really going to lean in? And this is when, and they've been leaning in. Sony cannot handle a war of attrition with Microsoft. There's no amount of money. They do not have the capital on hand to fight Microsoft.
And they just spent $200 million in Epic's latest round of funding too. Mm-hmm. So $200 million cash was sunk into Epic Games just a few days ago. Right. So that's a huge cash spend of the limited capital that is available on hand to begin with. And we do know that Microsoft is interested, right? They have said publicly.
They tried to do it in 2019.
Yeah, after the ZeniMax purchase. Yeah. After the ZeniMax purchase, which, by the way, on MMO Bomb, that has become our go-to comparison. How valuable is something? 7.5 ZeniMaxes. 8.5 ZeniMaxes. Roblox is worth 7 ZeniMaxes. But at that time, they did say not only were they looking at still other acquisitions, but they specifically said Japanese companies, and everybody kind of thought, Capcom, Sega, those Konami. Players, those mid-tier players,
and
were the ones, that could be grabbed. Now, Square Enix would be a hell of a grab, and I don't necessarily. I'm with you, Chris. I don't necessarily have a problem with it going to Microsoft, except I don't like the exclusivity of the platforms until Game Pass could then break out and be on whatever the hell it wants.
Already rumors
that could sway me.
Well, also already rumors that Game Pass is coming to Switch. It's like, honestly, that's exactly the model. Like Phil Spencer coming out and saying our games will be where Game Pass is. Literally saying the line in the sand. Like, you want Starfield, you want Bethesda games, you want Doom, great, Game Pass. And honestly, I could see Game Pass coming to Amazon's Luna, Google Stadia, and things of that nature, to where it's like we're just opening the playing field even more. Here's where I want to come in, and I'm going to really alienate a few people, but I'm going to talk to you guys. It's not boring. What's the cost? What would Square Enix go for? Anywhere from $8 to $15 billion when me and my dad sat down and looked at it. It goes up to $15 billion when you start talking about multiple bidders. Who are the bidders? Sony has to buy Square Enix. Hands down. It's not a matter of should, could, whatever. They don't, they're done. They're done. They're not a platform anymore. Who's bidding? It's going to be Sony, Google, Amazon, or Microsoft. Those are the four players in this regards. If Sony loses Square Enix,
it's a big loss.
It's
not the
it's
loss.
Bigger.
It's the loss in our space.
It's bigger. It's a bigger loss because when you think about it already, let's take Square Enix off the table for a second and see what's already happened. Microsoft just did a huge middle finger with Outriders on Game Pass. I'm talking massive, meaning anybody who thought about picking that game up on PlayStation got denied. They're like, I've talked to numerous people who are like, I was going to play it on PlayStation, but now I'm not. What did that actually cost? It cost Sony 30% per every sale of that game. MLB The Show, 30% per. Well, actually, MLB The Show is 100% to Sony. So Here's the other thing. Sony's over-leveraged themselves financially in terms of dropping the PlayStation 5 to a price that it compete with Microsoft. That console should have been $600 at a minimum, still selling for a loss. How do they make up that cost? $70 games, which gamers aren't fond of. So that automatically pushes people into the competition. If Square-Enix loses the ability, they're going to compromise, and you're going to see Game Pass on PlayStation if Microsoft decides to be generous. And that is the mathematics behind it. I don't think Sony has a choice. I think they have to go toe-to-toe, and this is make or break. I know it's a hard line in the sand for me, but that's just how when I look at the numbers, because you could sit here and tell me how awesome Sony's first-party games are, but I'm a Sony guy because I play Square Enix games. You take that completely off the platform, I'm really not invested in their first-party, and what first-party game do they have that's a multiplayer hit?
I don't know if the line of demarcation is that clear in my mind.
That's fine. Yeah, that's why I knew this is going to be a good topic.
I agree with your overall, the financial analysis. I watched the piece that you did on that. Great stuff. I think that company could go for anywhere from 14 to 20 billion, a little bit of a markup for a sale deal. So my numbers jive right with you. I do think Sony has to be cautious about who they're going up against here, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Nintendo. I kind of take Amazon out of the equation. I feel like Amazon's feeling a little burnt right now by the hundreds of millions they've invested in gaming and had zero return on that investment yet. I don't think they're going anywhere. They still got New World that maybe will be okay enough to carry them for a couple of years into a new project. But I don't think they're in a position to really want to dive into gaming.
Depends on how hungry. What I mean by them is how hungry are they? Because at some point you're like, I've spent $100 million.
I think is just unlikely. Yeah, they have the capital, of course. Yeah, but I think they're unlikely because of the Japanese culture stuff I was talking about earlier. I think if it goes to an American company, Microsoft is far more likely than Google. I don't think it shuts Sony's gaming down or anything like that. I do think it puts a huge damper on their ability to continue to be Sony, something, Chris, you alluded to a little earlier, where Sony might not be making the best decisions in our heads, but it is very Sony, the decisions that they're making. If Microsoft picked them up, I don't think Sony's dead in the water, but I think their hands are now tied. They have to come to the table with opening up Game Pass on the Sony platforms. They have to be more cognizant about opening things up because the options are either
open or die.
Open up and play along, or go die 10 years from now because we're going to just siphon things from you slowly.
It's a partner or perish.
Yeah. So kind of like Netflix, right? Walking into the Blockbuster. Hey, do you guys you guys want to partner up, or do you just want to go away?
15 million. They had the option to buy a Netflix for 15 million, and they did not.
Yep.
So that's a little history lesson there. It actually gets more interesting, especially when it talks about there's the real business side of things, and that's where my mind starts going.
The question is, does that version of history play out the same way? Right? They buy Netflix for 15 million and they use it as an extension of Blockbuster, and then the next thing takes off in its place.
I actually don't think you have a Netflix or a Blockbuster at that point.
No, you don't,
because they're not going to run it the nimble way that it ended up being run.
Right. I think when it comes to the 2008 financial crisis is what technically killed Blockbuster.
They were over-leveraged.
Not Netflix. They were over-leveraged in an environment that couldn't handle debt at the moment.
Right. And it's so, Chris, you're about to go into
So if we're talking about price, I think we go back to the car analogy. I think we go back to, the problem is you can say it's 15 billion is their valuation, but they owe shareholders a fiduciary duty to capitalize on it. Yeah. And so if they're going to sell out control, if they're going to sell out long-term growth, long-term planning on a wave of success, Avengers aside, like they've had, and they have immense success ahead of them. They've got Yoshi P leveraged to the nines. They're doing what they need to be doing. They've extracted his maximum life force. And so with all of that headed out, you owe your shareholders. It's got to just be that's why I put stack.
That's why I put the stack at about 15 to 20 billion,
at least
with a valuation
of
13 to 14. Yeah.
At least three, so 21 billion. For Chris?
Yeah, something where you're like, it wasn't for sale, because if it's not for sale, if it's not for sale, my car is not for sale.
Right.
Okay. I drive a 2005 Jeep Wrangler. It's one of the last years that they had a Mercedes transfer case put in it before Mercedes split from Daimler Chrysler. There's only 76,000 of them made. I have a Rubicon, so I have a dialed up package on it. my car is not worth that much money. It is old. They get wrecked every year off-road. There are only so many left. The problem with selling my car to you is that my car is worth single-digit thousands of dollars, is that I can't go buy another one. It doesn't go up in value because not that many people want it. But to the people that do, every time I have taken it to a shop to be repaired, I've been offered more than its value. Just by the mechanic. He comes out and he goes, hey, here's what we need to do. By the way, I got one of the guys in the back is offering you this number. First couple of years I owned the car, that number was more than I paid. And so like, but the problem is I can't get it back. Yeah. And so if you can't get that control back. So it needs to be a number where Square-Enix was not for sale. And then Microsoft came in and offered $25 billion. Well, lots of things become for sale at $25 billion.
Right.
So like there's a number where it's like, I mean, I'll take your call.
Right.
Maybe you should come out and say hello. Are you vaccinated?
Come on down.
Stop by. We'll have lunch. I think there's a number there where it goes that way. And then the question is, off of the ZeniMax deal, off of Game Pass having so much success right now, let's assume we're only talking about Microsoft here, because Sony, like you said, it's logical for them to make the purchase. It's just a question of, do they have it? So Microsoft is the other one that it's more interesting. Where does it fit in their plan? Because the only way Microsoft has been keeping up with PlayStation right now is it has been a barrage of good press after good press after good press, to the point where they can make a mistake on the price of gold or whatever that mess was, and it just gets washed out by just oh, you want to talk bad about us? Oh, did you see MLB The Show? You want to talk bad about us? Oh, did you see we bought Bethesda? Like, it's just it seems like a really expensive thing to just be part of a barrage of good press.
Yeah, I do want to clarify one thing, because Short Change Hero says, even hypothetically, saying that they would fail if they don't buy Square-Enix, gross over exaggeration, it is in context of that if them or Microsoft, if somebody acquires Square-Enix and Sony loses that leverage, that's a huge chunk of IP and identity. It's like if somebody said, hey, we just bought up Mario from Nintendo. I don't know why they were selling it, but they did. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, it's a whole, it's because it basically, it's not the thing that they shut down the day it happens. It's the fact that you all of a sudden have continued more mind share moving in another direction. And Sony banking a lot of their financials off of that $70 price point, lowering the cost of PlayStation because they have to get in the PS5 with their with the model. This is what makes the whole structure very fascinating to me, is that when they came in and they walked it back a little bit, but saying we believe in hard generations. And I think gamers are excited to see what happens with Forspoken, where it's a IP that is built for the PlayStation 5 forward. Like, that's something that's going to be really exciting to see. But when you have that hard line in the sand, and then you have the competition saying, we're going to respect all generations, etc., you start losing. And what Sony has done is they built a brand of blockbusters, which is great. That those blockbusters help generate sale after sale. You don't have to put in microtransactions into a Sony first party game, because they're getting 30% off of every sale that game generates on the back end, all the third party. If you lose third party, you don't have, in my opinion, they don't have a strong enough first party, like if you would say something compared to Nintendo. Nintendo has been able to release consoles successfully off the back of their first party and not having to rely on third party. Sony has to have that third party, and they have for such a long time. They're losing that right now in waves, and if they lost Square-Enix, it's just a matter of time.
You're assuming, though, that we're the only three people. I have two friends with PS5s that have gone hands-on, and both of them, when I mention the new Square-Enix title, everything from Octopath to Outriders to Final Fantasy XIVs, they literally don't know what those games are.
Right.
Yeah, so, and there is nothing that you just said, Brian, that I necessarily disagree with, except the first thing I said way back when that I disagree with. I don't think the line of demarcation is as deep as you make it out to be. Maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong.
Right. I also think in 10
all
years
of these
blocks.
companies, I think all of these companies are so buffered against catastrophic failure in one aspect of their business.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Sony, we're not talking
company,
about Capcom, who is games and some side peripherals, or Konami, who is games and pachinko machines. We're talking about Microsoft and PC computing and Windows, and I mean they're so buffered against catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
I do think it hurts. Undoubtedly, it hurts if Sony doesn't get it. I don't think it's the be all end all that you seem to lean a little more towards. I think it just forces them to play ball in a way that, honestly, I wouldn't be that unhappy as a consumer if they did go and play ball.
That's the other option, is that it forces them to change. And so, like,
maybe.
Like what I was saying, like, I'm not saying that Sony as a corporation
depends on the title.
Closes shop, shuts doors, and all. They're like, oh, guys, we lost. It's that literally, like, when you look back at this moment, it would be like you would not recognize Sony pre this acquisition and Sony post this obviously hypothetical acquisition until any money is exchanged hands in this regard.
Yeah, again, Square publicly saying we're not for sale. We don't have any offers. By the way, if you don't know the back end of business, mergers and acquisitions talks and scenarioing happens all the time.
All the time.
Every day. Mm-hmm. I've been in charge of drawing up M&A documents for multiple companies that may never go where or may never even be viewed by somebody. So it's normal that stuff's being discussed.
It takes a lot of work. I hate being acquired too, because it's like, okay, guys, like new set of rules. Here's what you can't say. Here's what you can. Like, it's a pain in the butt. And so, like, anything can go wrong. And we actually saw, like, what's really fascinating about this is that Microsoft did try to do this back in 1999. They got pretty much to the signing ceremony, or at least where the letter intent, like, et cetera. And Square-Enix was like, we want more money. And I'm so glad they did, because I don't think we'd have the Square today. I'm so glad 14.1.0 failed, because we wouldn't have the Square today without some of the lessons that they've had to learn hard. Chris, I want you to have a final thought before we go into talking about
I would point out that Phil Spencer is not running Xbox like Sony would run Xbox. He is not a scorched earth mentality. He's definitely playing to his strengths. They paid a lot of money for ZeniMax, and they're going to get some exclusive content out of it. Absolutely. But he's not a scorched earth guy. He's not being vindictive just to be vindictive. So he has said, and so far actions have lined up to agree that anywhere that a game already has an established audience on a platform, they're going to be respectful of that. So Final Fantasy XIV would still have a PS5 and then a PS6 and then a PS7 edition. Final Fantasy games like 7R would continue to likely have all of their chapters released on time, day and date on PlayStation. The question becomes, with that next Avengers style title, that next thing that out of nowhere they get put in charge of, Square Enix lands the next Star Wars game, the next Lord of the Rings game. That's where you start to see exclusivity creep in as a conversation. But Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 17, 18, 19, 20, those are all going to still release on a PlayStation, because you just paid a lot of money for Square and you have an entire install base that will buy it. So, like, Microsoft still likes money, and
then you still have contracts for exclusivities that need to be honored.
And that's why Game Pass is struggling on PC, I think. They haven't been super transparent about that, but I bet the reason that Game Pass on PC is struggling is because I bet there is a lot of exclusivity clauses in Steam agreements as a distributor, and games agreed to that because there wasn't another main distributor. And now Game Pass is like, well, what about us? And they're like, technically I agreed to something. And so I think we're gonna have to wait for those to be reneged, where Steam's either gonna need to, they probably didn't pay very much for that clause, and they're either now going to have to, or it's suddenly gonna be like, oh, on Steam or Game Pass on PC.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting one way or the other. And whether it's actually like Sony and Square in this case, we do know, like, this is not the end of the acquisitions, and I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that. And yes, if it comes down to exclusivity, I think it's wrong. I don't think we want to see that, and that's where I'm hoping that, if nothing else, that we do get to see Bethesda games on a PlayStation platform. But at some point, like, just because, like, you've got friends that don't know like Square Enix games, Chris, like, the Bethesda deal really didn't mean anything to me. Like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, that it's earth shattering. But it's not like that's my game. Like, those are the games I play. They mean more to Brandon, my brother, the Yeti. But outside of him, I'm like, all right, like, I'll try it. But that's just not my thing. I wish it was, but it's not in that regards. But let's go on. Yeah.
I also don't think if Avengers didn't crash as hard as it did, I don't think there's sharks in the water trying to look at maybe buying Square Enix, or maybe it could possibly be for sale too. That's still hurting Square a lot.
Well, they're still developing for it, in that regard. So it's just, we'll have to, maybe they'll turn it around.
They're gonna Realm Reborn it. They're releasing an expansion for a game that hasn't finished being a game.
I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.